November 27th, 1991, West London Crematorium, Kensal Green. The morning was cold. The kind of cold that arrives in London before dawn in late November and stays. The chapel held perhaps 40 people. Two Parsi priests conducted the ceremony. The coffin carried a single red rose. Aretha Franklin's voice played first, Precious Lord, Take My Hand, and then You've Got a Friend. And then Montserrat Cabal singing Verdi, the aria that Freddie Mercury had loved above all others. 5 minutes, that was all. Then it was done. And the 40 people who had been inside the chapel came back out into the cold morning. Brian May came out. Roger Taylor came out. Elton John came out. The family came out. The friends. The inner circle. They stood on the forecourt of the crematorium in the November air, with the wreaths lined along the entrance, and they did what people do after funerals when they are not ready to leave, but there is nowhere to go. They stood. They spoke. They held each other. And John Deacon walked to his car. He did not stop to speak to anyone. He got into the car. He drove away. Nobody has ever asked him where he went. The funeral had been organized with the specific precision of Freddie Mercury's private life, small, controlled, protected from the world outside. No cameras permitted. The guest list drawn tightly. Bomi and Jair Bulsara. Freddie's parents. Kashmira Cook. His sister. Mary Austin, who would take the ashes and keep their location secret for the rest of her life. Jim Hutton. Peter Freestone. Dave Clark. The 3 remaining members of Queen. Elton John. 40 people. 25 minutes. What was said or sung inside the chapel belonged to those 40 people. Beyond what the Queen spokeswoman confirmed, Aretha Franklin, You've Got a Friend. The Cabal aria, It Has Never Been Described. John Deacon was 40 years old on November 27, 1991. He had been in Queen since he was 19. He had known Freddie Mercury for 20 years, longer than he had known his own children, longer than most relationships of any kind last. The specific endurance of a professional and personal bond that had outlasted everything that should have broken it. He had been in the studio with Freddie Mercury during the Innuendo sessions through 1990 and into 1991. Watching the sessions proceed with the specific concentration of someone who understood that time was the resource they did not have. He had played every note. He had shown up. He had done what Freddie asked, kept making music, kept being there, kept going. And now he was sitting in a chapel in Kensal Green on a cold November morning while 2 Parsi priests conducted a 25-minute ceremony, and Aretha Franklin's voice filled the space. What John Deacon felt in the chapel, not recorded. His expression, not photographed. The 40 people in the room were not there to observe each other. They were there for Freddie. But someone noticed that John Deacon was very still. Not the stillness of someone managing their grief in public. The stillness of someone who has arrived somewhere inside themselves where the ordinary movements of a body in public space no longer apply. The stillness of someone who has arrived somewhere inside themselves where the ordinary movements of a body in public space no longer apply. The aria ended. The 2 Parsi priests finished what they had to do. The chapel went quiet, in the way chapels go quiet when the ceremony is over, and the reality of what has happened is no longer contained by the structure of ritual. People began to stand. To move toward each other. To do the things that people do in the aftermath of a funeral service, when the service has provided the last available structure, and there is nothing left but the rest of the day. Brian May stood. Roger Taylor stood. Elton John stood. John Deacon stood. He stood up from the pew, and he moved toward the aisle, and he walked toward the door. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said, "Where are you going?" He walked out of the chapel and into the cold November morning, and the 40 people gradually emerged behind him onto the forecourt, where the wreaths were lined along the entrance. And John Deacon walked to his car. He got in. He drove away. Brian May stayed. He spoke with people on the forecourt. He has said in various forms that the period immediately after Freddie's death was the hardest of his life. The immediate period, the first days, the funeral, the specific experience of completing the last formal obligation, and then having to go somewhere. Brian May has never described where he went after the funeral. But he has described going back into the world. Beginning, however haltingly, the process of continuing. This is what Brian May does. He has been continuing for 35 years. John Deacon got in the car and drove. Nobody knows where John Deacon went after Freddie Mercury's funeral. This is not a gap in the record that has been overlooked. It is a gap that has been consistently present across 35 years of Queen biography and documentation. And it has remained a gap because nobody who matters has been asked the question, and no one who was there has thought to answer it. What is available is the shape of the man who had joined Queen at 19 and who had been the quiet constant through everything that followed, who had played on every album, who had written Another One Bites the Dust in a hotel room in America on a day when the other three were doing something else, who had never, in 20 years of being in the most scrutinized band in British rock history, said more than he needed to say. He got in the car. The car went somewhere. And the most likely thing, the thing most consistent with everything that is known about John Deacon, is that he went home. Not to a party. Not to a gathering of friends. Not to the industry, which would have had a version of what to do next. Home. To his wife, Veronica, who had been married to him since 1975, to their 6 children, to the specific domestic interior that had been, for 20 years, the counterweight to everything that Queen required. He went home. He closed the door. He did not come back out for a very long time. Veronica Deacon was at home. She had not attended the funeral. The guest list had been drawn tightly, and the 40 people who were there were the 40 people who needed to be there. She was at home with the children. She had known since November 24th what the day would hold. She had prepared, in whatever way a person prepares for the return of someone they love from the funeral of the person that person loved most. John Deacon drove home. He walked through the door. Veronica Deacon has never spoken publicly about what happened next, about what he said when he came in, what he looked like, whether he could speak at all. She is a profoundly private person, as private as her husband, perhaps more so. She has never given an interview about Queen or Freddie Mercury or any aspect of the life that music built. What she knew on the afternoon of November 27, 1991, as she waited for her husband to come home from Freddie Mercury's funeral, that the person who walked through the door would not be the same person who had walked out of it that morning, and that she would have to be enough, whatever enough looked like, for as long as it needed to look like that. For as long as it needed to look like that. In the months that followed, John Deacon disappeared from the public record in a way that is unusual even for someone who had always been the quiet one. Brian May gave interviews. Roger Taylor gave interviews. The band began the process of organizing the tribute concert, which would take place at Wembley in April 1992. The logistics of a memorial for one of the most famous musicians in the world required decisions and announcements, and the specific industry machinery of grief made public. John Deacon participated in none of the public aspects of this. He was consulted. He agreed to perform at the tribute concert. He showed up on April 20th, 1992, and played every note. But between the funeral in November and the concert in April, John Deacon was not visible. He was not in interviews. He was not in photographs. He was at home, the home he had driven to after the funeral. The door that had closed. The specific and chosen invisibility of a person who had decided, in the car on the way back from Kensal Green, that the world could have whatever it needed from Queen, but that what remained of John Deacon was going to stay in Surrey for a while. On April 20th, 1992, John Deacon showed up at Wembley. He played the tribute concert. He stood on the stage that he had stood on with Freddie Mercury in 1985 and 1986, and he played every note. He played I Want to Break Free, he played Radio Gaga, he played We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, and the closing set with Brian May and Roger Taylor, and the rotating roster of guest vocalists. He was present, he played well. He was by every visible account, John Deacon doing what John Deacon did contained. Precise, the bassist doing the work, not performing anything beyond the work itself. And then the concert ended. And he went home again. There was one more public appearance January 1997. The recording of No One But You in Paris. The final Queen session with John Deacon's name attached to it. He played. At some point during the Paris sessions, he looked at Brian May and Roger Taylor and said, I can't do this anymore. Not angrily. Simply accurately. He went home. He has been at home since. Nobody has asked John Deacon where he went after Freddie Mercury's funeral. John Deacon does not give interviews. And the answer, whatever it was, has seemed less important than the fact of the disappearance itself. John Deacon drove away from the crematorium on November 27, 1991, and the public version of John Deacon, the bassist, in a famous band. The person who had existed in that role for 20 years effectively ended there. Not legally. He attended the tribute concert. He recorded the final session. But the John Deacon who drove away from West London Crematorium that morning drove towards something that was not the public life. He drove toward home. He drove toward the door that would close. He drove toward the 30 years of silence that followed. He was simply the first of the three to understand that this was where he was going. He was simply the first of the three surviving members to understand that this was where he was going. Brian May understood it later. He has been going there slowly for 35 years, toward the door that closes, toward the private world, toward the place where the grief lives, without the performance of grief. Roger Taylor has been slower still. He is still on stages, still making music, still present in the public version of Queen, but Brian May has said that he and Roger often feel that Freddie is in the corner of the room, that they know exactly what he would say, that losing him was like losing a brother. These are the words of people who are still living inside the loss. John Deacon drove away from the funeral and decided, in whatever way decisions like this are made, not with a resolution or a plan, but with the simple exhaustion of someone who has nothing left to perform, that he was done with the loss being public. He would keep the loss. He would not keep performing it. He got in the car, he went home, he has been there since. The question nobody asked him, where did you go? The answer, home. The answer that contained everything, and I never came back. The house in This is where John Deacon went on November 27, 1991, and where, in the most essential sense, he has remained. Not a famous house. Never photographed for a magazine. A house where a man who was once in Queen lives with his wife. The ordinary streets of a Surrey suburb. Brian May has described the dynamic. John left the band more than 30 years ago, but is still part of Queen. Business decisions go through management. His silence is taken as acquiescence. He has the band's blessing, and they have his, but he does not call. He does not come to the events. He is in Surrey. In the house he drove to after the funeral. In the life that was always the counterweight to the one Queen required. He has been there since November 27, 1991, since the morning he got in the car and decided without announcement, without ceremony, that he was done. The disappearance of John Deacon from public life is the most complete withdrawal in the history of British rock music. Not a breakdown. Not a scandal. Simply. A man who was in one of the most famous bands in the world, who drove away from his bandmate's funeral one November morning and did not come back. He lives in South London. He plays golf. He signed a vinyl record for Freddie's birthday auction in 2025. These are the public facts of 34 years. Brian May, we don't speak. which is a shame. But we have his blessing. Everything through an accountant. The man who drove away on November 27th, 1991, has not come back. He went home. He closed the door. Nobody asked him where he went. Nobody asked him why. He has not offered. The silence, which has lasted longer than most careers, is the only answer that exists. The silence, which has lasted longer than most careers, is the only answer that exists. And the specific quality of that silence, the 34 years of it, the consistency of it, the way it has absorbed everything that has been directed at it without producing a response, is itself a kind of eloquence. John Deacon, who was always the quiet one, who always knew more than he let on, who wrote the bass lines that held the songs together while the rest of the band performed the songs, John Deacon has made his silence into the final bass line, the one nobody asked him to play, the one nobody can hear except as an absence in the record, the one that has been running underneath everything since he got in the car outside West London Crematorium on the morning of November 27th, 1991. He drove home. He closed the door, and the silence began. It is still running. It has never stopped. It is the longest thing he ever played, and nobody has asked him what it means. November 27th, 1991, West London Crematorium, Kensal Green. Cold morning. 2 Parsi priests. 25 minutes. 40 people. Aretha Franklin. You've got a friend. Cabal and Verdi the coffin, with the single red rose. Then it was done. Brian May came out. Roger Taylor came out. Elton John came out. John Deacon came out. He walked to his car. He got in. He drove away. Nobody asked him where he went. He went home. To Surrey. To Veronica. To the 6 children. To the door that closed. He came back once. April 20th, 1992. Wembley, the tribute concert. He played every note. He went home again. January 1997. Paris, he looked at Brian May and Roger Taylor and said, I can't do this anymore. He went home. He has been home since. Nobody asked him where he went. After the funeral. The answer is Surrey. The answer that contains everything is. And I never came back. The silence has been running for 34 years. It started on a cold November morning in a car park outside a crematorium in Kensal Green. He got in the car. He drove. The door closed. Still closed. Still him. Still his.